Liberation Day. What the hell just happened? Okay, you're gonna you have to bear with me for a moment here. Uh, in 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte, who by the way, he was about average height for his time, decided to invade Russia. There were a lot of reasons he did this. Some good, some bad. But man, did that shit not work out for him. I think he just figured that France was so undeniably great that Russia would just flop over. I mean, he just beaten them in a battle a little while ago, so. See, France had been pretty much running Europe for centuries before Napoleon. Oh yeah, I know, we've all been taught that England was the big deal, but actually not so much. Most Americans have just grown up with Shakespeare and English propaganda, which always downplays France. But the truth is, rich, powerful, and geographically centrally positioned France has been bossing Europe around for a long time. One of these days I should do a whole series of these on Shakespearean historical propaganda. Anyway, Napoleon. Napoleon knew about the harsh Russian winter. He knew his troops wouldn't be able to live off the land. And yes, he knew how big Russia was. Napoleon was brilliant. But brilliant Napoleon, who, like I said, he's about average height, was also an egomaniacal dick. He ended the French Revolution by declaring himself emperor. The very kind of royalty thing the whole revolution had been about. And then, by tapping into the remaining sense of revolutionary self-defense, Napoleon turned and conquered a Europe the French had only dominated before. Everything in Europe had always revolved around France. But after he popped a crown on his counter-revolutionary head, everything also revolved around what Napoleon Bonaparte was going to do. I mean, France was the shit. In a good way. But then, Napoleon made his gamble in Russia. Ended up destroying France as the center of influence in Europe. And he didn't know it at the time. I mean, even after he got back to Paris from his disastrous Russian campaign, Napoleon still thought he could overcome his miscalculation. But it was all downhill from there. And France's time of European dominance was over. One ego, making one really stupid choice in hundreds of years of France being the sun around which all the other countries orbited, was history. Everybody forgot about how important France had been. And the French, they have spent the last 210 years trying to figure out who they are. And Napoleon was undeniably a genius, but his ego got in the way. Oh, but what if? What if, instead of having a genius with a big ego in charge, a country had a mediocre-minded Nepo baby with a big ego in charge? I mean, what if instead of average-heighted but brilliant megalomaniac, yet a 6'2" repeatedly bankrupt, rapist, racist, sociopathetic, convicted felon who was clearly more interested in fondling cheeseburgers than reading the Bill of Rights, and who couldn't comprehend the historical importance of democracy if all the constitutions in the world were bound together and dropped on him from a great height, which, now that I say it out loud, I would pay to see. What if, instead of a stupid but brilliant Napoleon, a bad choice was made by a stupid with just more stupid? Someone like, I don't know, how about Donald J. Trump? So, historical background. If you hadn't noticed, it's kind of my thing. World War II ends, and every industrialized nation has had their factories destroyed. Their railroads have been ripped to shreds, bridges blown up, roads full of craters, misery, starvation, everybody struggling to just get back to the standard of living they had during the Great Depression. Well, not everybody. See, there was one country whose factories hadn't gotten bombed. Can you guess which one? It's the one that convinced itself that its post-war prosperity was because of clean living, capitalism, and Wheaties. Fat and untouched with lots of stuff to sell and money to lend to all the countries still digging out from the rubble, the United States became the factory, the supermarket, and the bank of the world. Not because we were better, but because there was nowhere else for the countries to go. And just to show them how generous we were, our capitalists even put some of our factories and plantations in their countries, and everybody benefited. Our capitalists saved money by paying their workers less than they would have had to pay workers in the United States, and in return, those countries got not bombed by us. So it was a win-win. I mean, sure, we had to overthrow some governments and assassinate some presidents, but hey, you can't make the omelet of global economic domination without machine gunning a few eggs of democracy. It's an old saying. Anyway, the United States got very used to calling the shots when it came to the world's economy. We even wrote up the trade rules for everybody else to follow, and they did. Well, not everybody. Not the commies. And even though we did all we could to murder them into seeing the American way was the best way, it didn't always work. But even without the commies, American economic hegemony was running along. The United States was the center. It was the sun at the center of the economic solar system. We were on top. We were the shit. In a good way. But no matter what the situation, when people or corporations or countries get on top, they have tendency to want to freeze history at that point. They want changes to stop because they are up there. They want their party to last just like that, just last forever and ever and ever. But then, the times, they change. And the more times change, the more those at the top become nostalgic for the good old days when they were the shit in a good way. So for various reasons I talk about in my video on capitalism, which you should watch, even though the United States wanted things to stay the same forever and ever, we slowly went from being the factory and farm and bank of the world to being the farm and bank of the world, to being the bank of the world, to being the country that still demands to be treated like we're still the factory and farm and bank of the world. But the times, they had changed. And sometimes you got to adjust to the way things are, not the way things were, the way things you want them to be. I mean, we all know this, right? Well, no, actually we don't. You know what? Speaking of England, we like I was doing just 7 minutes ago, it's always useful to look at recent English history. Because whatever wacky shit their crazy-ass conservatives are doing over there, our crazy-ass conservatives will do over here a few years later. We're so unoriginal. Anyway, their version of the stupid that we're doing right now was Brexit. That particularly British bit of self-fuckery that they said was all about immigration, jobs, and above all, trade. Had nothing to do with immigration, jobs, or trade. It was all about nostalgia. It was all about the desperate assertion by a minority of over-emotional nationalists that their country was an inherently special place, a blessed realm, a place other nations were jealous of and desperately needed, and was just as powerful and influential as it had been in the nationalist stories they read as children, back when they were the sun around which all of the other countries orbited. They just wanted to make Great Britain great again. And did that Brexit shit work out for them? Oh, hell no! And for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which is you cannot insist to someone that they cannot live without you. That's like crazy stalker talk. But Donald Trump saw the disaster of Brexit and said, hold my beer. Immigration, jobs, and above all, trade. And after he and his own nostalgic gaggle of sycophantic dick ticks started illegally sweeping up legal immigrants and pompously promising jobs in factories that were shutting down, he stumbled on to the above all trade part and thought that a swipe of his Sharpie could turn back the clock to when the United States was central and essential to world trade without understanding the unique historical and geographical circumstances that put us in that position. It wasn't the Wheaties. It was just having the right location, the right resources, and unbombed factories at the right time. As for Trump's tariffs, besides thinking that raising prices for American consumers on things Americans want to buy will magically make domestic factories pop up like mushrooms across the country, Trump also believes that his self-inflicted shotgun-to-the-face farce will somehow show all the other countries that they cannot live without the U.S., that we are still the sun around which all the rest of them orbit. Yeah, no. What has been underlined for the countries around the world by Trump, by trying to manipulate and threaten them with his tariffs, is how important it is for those nations to learn how to work around the United States, how to work without the United States. When he signed his precious executive orders, they should have just said right at the top, the end of the economic hegemony of the United States. I mean, it was inevitable that our domination would end. Like I keep saying, times, they change. But Captain Dumpster Fire certainly sped it up. How? Because no one likes to be held hostage. Not a country, not a person. Yeah, I mean, some people like to be tied up. That's different. There, at least you could pick a safe word. But when it comes to tying up a country's economy, the only safe word is avoidance. Nations will now avoid working with the United States because they can. The United States is like the cruel uncle whose abusive weirdoisms you put up with because your parents said, you better be nice to him, so he'll put you in his will. And then you realize, fuck him. Even if he has a will, it's not worth all this bullshit. See, China doesn't have to buy soybeans from Illinois or Iowa or Minnesota or Indiana. Just buy them from Brazil. Europe will buy their cars from China rather than Detroit. Kenya will make infrastructure deals with Beijing rather than Washington. International banking is just as easily done in Hamburg or Shanghai as in New York. And it doesn't matter if the U.S. takes over the Panama Canal, because China's Belt and Road trade system stretches halfway around the world, 138 countries, and it bypasses us completely. In the last couple of decades, the rest of the world has learned a few things. Anybody can sew blue jeans, make a hamburger, or a bucket of chicken, or make computers, or cell phones. Oh, and all of our online services like Google and Amazon and ChatGPT and iCloud can all be replaced by online services elsewhere. All Trump did was alienate people around the world and just over our northern and southern borders. People who they bought our stuff all of these years just because it was American. And he stopped them valuing our friendship because they thought the United States might be there for them. By trying to recapture the past and insisting on our centrality, he made sure no one wants the U.S. to be central ever again. And the nations will start working together on how to avoid relying on us in the future. Trump didn't just start a trade war. He underlined for every other country, especially our allies, that they cannot rely on us, and how important it is for them to make sure the United States is non-essential to their prosperity. So, he, A, guaranteed the economic suffering of the working class in the United States, and B, accelerated the need for other countries to have our unreliable bullying asses become irrelevant. And it was all downhill from there. And not in a good way.